You're listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro, a place to learn about how to grow your business and stay ahead of technological advances before they become mainstream. This episode is sponsored by Ingram Micro's Xvantage, the next level way to transform your business's potential and reshape how customers see you through advanced transactional data. Let's get into it. Welcome to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro. I'm your host, Shelby Skrhak, and our guest today is Adam Mansour, Chief Security Officer at Act0. Adam, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Shelby. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. Well, today we are talking about, first of all, we're sitting down with Act0 to understand a little bit about detection and response and why this detection and response is powered by AI and why that can be superior. So let's start off, though, by let's understand a little bit about Act0 because it's the first time we're talking to you guys on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about the company.
Yeah, most of the founding members of Act0 had come from the defense community, government, places where over the last 4 administrations, they've been trying to sponsor, educating in the Senate Intelligence Committee different members of the Senate and trying to explain how this new thing called cyber, right, the fifth domain, land, sea, air, space, cyber, was an increasing attack surface for many businesses, and that critical infrastructure needed a lot of additional enforcement, additional protections that they weren't putting in place. So they're trying to push for a mandate a couple of different ways. And so basically what it ended out to in 2019 was the ability for them to come in and sort of target the small to medium businesses with a service that would allow them to find and detect different types of cyber attacks on their behalf and basically take over to try to block them, right? And so that's really what managed detection and response is in our history. And one of the most effective tools that we bring to the table, of course, is the leveraging of AI to stop things in progress, which is where, the speed is really critical to avoid, big damage.
And big damage is definitely an understatement. We don't have to tell this audience what a moneymaker this cybercrime can be. Just as an overview then, can we talk a little bit about the various options that are out there in terms of, managed detection and response and all of these stopgaps, I guess, from that companies are employing, these managed services that are trying to shore up their responses when they are getting hit. It's not a matter of if they get hit, it's a matter of when, right?
Yeah, from the money standpoint, it sort of drives a lot of attitudes, right? When you see that, ransomware payments are exceeding $20 to $40 billion a year, and the cybersecurity space is now roughly the size of the video game industry at $200 billion spent annually and projected to grow to $400 billion. It's important to understand where that money is being spent and how that sort of, those packages get deployed, right? From a MSP perspective, this is one of the things that, as a founding member of a company called Intelligo Networks, we were acquired in Act0 because of the way that we were sort of trying to change the way that you sort of source prevention, right? You can go and buy technology, right? You can go buy your favorite antivirus or your new firewall or your new, security analytics platform of choice. And typically those providers didn't manage their own technology stack. Right? And you start to see them doing that. You start to see MSPs trying to offer a single service that protects the endpoint, network, and cloud. That concept, moving to the idea that you bring the stack and the people and you sort of take control of the problem as opposed to simply selling software, is what managed detection and response is all about. But the focus should be on detecting and stopping the 2 most prevalent, versions of attack, right? Which is data loss, right? You don't want people stealing your stuff and threatening you with it. And ransomware, right? The stuff that leads to extortion. Because if you don't have that narrow focus as an MDR, you're not managing, detecting, and responding to those attacks. You're sort of managing technology, which is what an MSP does. So that's kind of the flavors that you can get to try to source in this space.
So without taking a pessimistic look at how large a surface this is and how it can be attacked, how and why do ransomware attackers continue to beat most of the defenses out there?
Yeah, I think when people think of ransomware, they think of encrypting files, right? Mm-hmm. They have to understand this is a larger pass of extortion, right? And that, whether it's financial crimes that are being basically perpetrated with the loss of your data, like wire fraud or, logging into users' bank credentials and taking data and taking money for themselves, this is all really just part of a design to make sure that they're compensated for their activity. So when you think about the surface, right, it's really anywhere that activity can be successful. And that could mean a lot of different things, right? It could mean, the cloud. It could mean a specialized, supplier application. It could mean, everything in your data center or your workstations getting encrypted.
Yeah.
Anywhere that they feel like they have leverage over you to gain, either extortion, money for extortion, or they can get paid with the stuff they stole. And so that's really what, the kind of the concept of ransomware and how broad it is. And if you think about just how many, if you think about your phone right now, how many different applications are on it? 50, 60, 100, right? Which one of those applications has sensitive information? What can listen to you? What can, capture things, right? The surface is growing much faster than our ability to secure it very thoroughly, right? And so, the problem seems to be this constant cat and mouse game where just as we think we have one surface under protection, they go and focus on another one because it's their job to keep finding their ways through the fence, right? And so this is really where you kind of say, well, what's the approach, right? Are we going and buying a technology for every single attack? Mm-hmm. Are we going and buying a technology for every single part of our surface? Are we going and buying skills that, are only specific to a particular arena, right? Web services or mobile services or cloud services? Or are we getting a single provider that's going to detect and respond to threats across those different surfaces, right? And so our endeavor really is to try to cover the surfaces, right? The material surfaces that are still your problem. And the way we think about it is if you make software, you're shipping a target. If you host software, you are the target, right? And so the idea is to kind of protect you where you host, right? Your endpoint, network, and cloud for right now. And, as those surfaces evolve with them.
I heard a phrase that, the cyber criminals, they only have to find one opening, and security professionals, they have to find them all. That is certainly a daunting task when you consider the labor shortage that we're facing, the amount of time and skill that is going into these attacks. So what does AI and machine learning then lend itself? Why does it lend itself so well to cybersecurity, and what does it do?
Certainly, I think if you look at the advances, people are now starting to really come to terms with just how advanced AI science is, right? So for the past several years, right, there's two kinds of AI, right? There's the general AI that you see in the movies, right? You go buy a ticket to see Steven Spielberg's human impersonation of a robot, right? And then you have the narrow AI, something that can take a particular task and maybe predict or do something a little bit better, right? And we see everything from ChatGPT with, generative AI coming up with better stories or better monologues for your favorite nighttime host, right? Those are the kinds of things that you can train and cheat to do very, very well in narrow focus, right? From us, the speed at which we could find and detect different types of stages in the attack lifecycle, right? So back to your earlier point, right? Most people think you have to cover every surface, that you have to find the attacker every opportunity that they could use to close the loop on them, right? To get them out of the environment. And you really only have to be right once. You have to just disrupt the attacker. You have to find and get rid of them. And that activity at various stages in the attack lifecycle, you can focus AI on things like a file analysis to see if your attachments are malicious, or if you're, running a ransomware encryption code, or you're running sort of credential theft, right? So while those are later stage attack lifecycle areas, that's where we focused our AI to be able to find and stop threats as they're happening, right? Because in many cases, if you look at how long it takes to take over a machine and then encrypt the entire, environment, if you have something that'll work, it could be minutes, right? And so you really do have to be blocking some of these things sub-second. And so that's a lot of the tooling, that's a lot of the work that we put in over the past few years to affect the prevention, right? And then what we mean by that is we need to be able to block more of those types of attacks as they change to be successful at finding and getting rid of the attacker before they cause damage.
So without getting too technical, but I want to understand this comparison between what is happening now with traditional cybersecurity tech forces, and then what is possible with the AI. I guess can we do a little bit of a comparison, what that process looks like and what the time difference we're talking about is?
Yeah, if you think about your average human analyst, right? Let's assume they've gone to school in computer science and they've been working in a security operations center for a couple of different years, right? They're a good practitioner. They understand attacks. They maybe really understand the tools that they're working with, right? And their job is to sit in front of a monitor and look 24/7 at a screen to tell you whether or not an alert is something they have to take a manual action on or not, right? And this is most SOC designs for the past several years. And so the idea is that, the human and the technology have had a human in the loop concept where you send them an alert and then they look at the alert and then they move on. And unfortunately, they have to make difficult decisions because, like we said, infrastructure has grown much higher, much faster than most SOC teams have in the past 15 years, right? And so the idea is that the overwhelming amount of data you'd actually have to look at to see every alert, to see every change, every log that these systems is producing simply taxes the human. There's just no way that they can do it. The average SOC analyst, thoroughly can look at 10 to 15 alerts a day. Right. And if you're producing that many false positives or you're not taking action, they have no time, right? They're always behind. And when you do the forensic analysis on these things, what's true of almost every ransomware attack is that somewhere in some database or system somewhere is a transaction record that says what the attacker did, how they got in, how they moved around, what they got access to. It's just not fast enough for you while those things are happening to discover, block them, right? And it's the job of something like AI is to go through those big amounts of data and take action for you to basically replace the review process of going through all of these different data points and trying to be fast enough to block something that might be buried in a mountain of data. Right? Especially when you think about, the employment rate of these people, it's underemployed, meaning there's just not enough of these people to go around. And frankly, if you're a small to medium business, you're probably not going to be able to attract one of these people. The budget, the resourcing, the training, just keeping them interested every day might be very difficult. And so you're almost always going to go to a third-party provider if you want 24/7 monitoring, and that's not your core business or you don't have massive funding as an application provider.
So are there any concerns from, I'm thinking of maybe the most common questions that come up. Are there concerns about the, percentage of correct detections, that the AI versus the human? I mean, we know that it works best when it works together. Like you said, Chat GPT is not there yet all by itself. And so can you speak to the detection rates and I guess the success rates that you've seen with Axiora?
Yeah, I mean, we continually test our software against new and evolving attacks that change every 24 hours, right? We've been happy to talk about, the fact that it isn't 100%, right? If you got in a Tesla cab or an Uber driving a Tesla, some of them just say, okay, you ready to go self-driving mode? And they'll drive you all the way to where you're going, with the autonomous driving feature. And what's very clear is that it's not 100%. You do have to put your hands on the wheel. You do have to be very aware that it's not going to be perfect, right? And so while we're north of 80, 90% of block rate for most, tools are probably 50% below that. And when we test them, for customers, right, to show them the value, right? It's certainly augmenting what's going on, but you do need the human, right? We're not at the point yet where the concerns around totally turning over to the autonomous AI is going to be something you can rely effectively, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of worry for most providers, MSPs listening, or people purchasing this technology or these services is that they worry that when the human's not there, the system's going to fail them, either because it's going to stop something it shouldn't have, or worse, right? It's going to miss something and no one's there to really check on it. And then it just goes right through, right? So the idea is that you don't have an unmonitored gate, right? You're not just, saying, oh, there's no guards here.
Right.
But what you're doing is saying you got a very, very smart system to kind of focus where that human attention should be.
So speaking of the, kind of the success rates here and what businesses are looking at. I mean, oftentimes, they are just coming to, an MSP or an MSSP to understand. They don't have a great grasp on it. They know they need the service. They know they need this protection, and they don't know how about to get it. What are the types of questions that the SMB should be asking of an MSP, a partner that's going to help them with these things? I guess what are some of these measures of effectiveness when looking at a cybersecurity partner or looking at a SOC?
For the past 2 years, I would walk into many different forums, right, and I would talk to CIOs or directors or IT admins and explain the three most important metrics, right? The block rate, how many of these attacker objectives, how many of the steps in the attack process could you block without having to get involved, right? Mm-hmm. The second one is the dwell time. How long could an attacker actually persist in your environment running these things before you escalate and remove them, right? How long before their belligerent activities get, tossed out? And the third is what we call the signals to noise ratio. What are you going to tell me about this when it's happening, right? How easy of a story is this to explain? And I used to think that I was fairly unique in this perspective, right? I walked from room to room and people, 12 times signal to noise, very geeky, concept. Maybe former maths engineer guys would go, oh, yeah, signal to noise. I remember that, right? But generally they weren't really kind of on the same page. In the last couple of months, when I went through and did CIO forums or something like that, they were all rhyming off each other's numbers, right? They would tout 5-minute response time. They would tout 99% signal to noise. They would tout a block rate of 90% against a breach simulation or a pen test. And so this is the kind of thing now where at least we understand, I think in the industry, that those three metrics are very valuable. They're solid, right? And that as long as we're using those, three prime indicators when we're looking at whether it's the success of an MSP in cybersecurity to defend us or a product to defend us, or whether it's, the performance of a team that's basically trying to adapt to these types of things, all of those metrics still hold true in those three designs, right? So that to me is kind of the top three. And this is what we measure for people for free to show them where they're at, right? Because this is how you decide whether MDR, I believe, is right for you or not, right? Is if you're already doing things that are really high block rate, really quick response time, really simple signal to noise, you've already compressed all those things, then you're ready to beat the adversary. They're going to move on, right? They're not going to stay on you. They want to get paid. They don't care about you. They care about the money, right? And so the idea is that, if you're very effective at doing this, you're likely going to be successful at preventing the many attempts that are going to be, happening. That doesn't mean you don't have to keep changing and looking at different areas, but it is the top three ways you should be measuring the success once you put something in.
And sorry, to clarify the signal to noise ratio, can you explain that just a bit?
Yeah. So imagine I had a break-in and every single alarm in the building went off. I couldn't even tell you where it is. You have a signal to noise ratio of 0 because you have to look at every single alarm, every single room, every single place to find that attacker, right? But if I have something that says, there's 14 different alarms going off and the attacker's in room ABCD123, and they were in this room, 5 minutes ago, then you have a perfect signal to noise ratio. Instead of the 100 alarms, you now have 1, right? And so that in cybersecurity is what we're saying is the signal to noise ratio in terms of where we try to explain one piece of information, getting one piece of information that describes the whole story, right? As opposed to having to look at every log, every alert, everything that kind of pieces it together for you. For the wide variety of people that do manage these technologies, every time it sets off an alert, if it goes to your inbox and you're like, oh, another one, right? Oh, I'll look at one thing and just kind of move on, right? That's not a good signal to noise ratio because you're ignoring the information that's coming your way, right? So the information has to be good. And that's really part of what the signal to noise ratio is. It's not about, how many alerts did you look at and how quickly. It's, could you look at one that explains a story, and it might be, many data points draw.
And that's what the AI does, because if you were to take a human approach to it, and if you were to, I guess, for lack of better terms, kind of spot check and take a look at one part of it, that wouldn't be a logical way to look at the entire system and what's wrong with it. That's bad logic. But with the AI piece, you're able to comb through all of those different signals to be able to find, okay, what's happening, and present that piece to it. Am I understanding that right?
In a way, what the AI is doing is just sort of tagging things, right? So it can say, I predict this is a virus because it's deleting your backups, right?
Got it.
And so it can label something to be like this workstation, that workstation. It's still the job of the person to connect the dots together, right? Is to say, okay, well, this was labeled with this was labeled with that. And there are some things that are automatically compressed, but it's our job to actually write a whole bunch of policies to figure out how to connect these dots efficiently. So that when it goes back to a person, it looks like a plain English letter, who, what, when, where, why did this, that, and it tells you kind of the story. So it helps connect the dots for sure. It helps with the dynamic nature of this. Like the more things change, right, the harder it is for one, rule to say this is a cat, that's not a cat, right? What's the difference between a cat and a fox? And on average, our head of data science used to say this was like how you teach a 2-year-old whether this is a dog or a cat. It takes 1,000 pictures to figure out that that's a cat, right? Machine learning looks kind of like that, right? It's to just be a little bit better a predictor without having to see every single version of it, right?
Got it. And then kind of as an extension of that, tell us a little bit about just the efforts that the company is making to stay on top of all these. Because like you said, I mean, this is a very dynamic nature. A cat isn't always going to be a cat. So maybe a cat is evolving into a I'm not going to go down that path, but yeah. So, I mean, what type of efforts are being made so that Act Zero does stay on top of all of these things?
Yeah, it's our job to keep up with what the adversary is doing. It's the adversary's job to beat us, right?
Yeah.
Like the math here is that, we've allocated a lot of the company to real analysis of real world data. I mean, part of the reason that, the MSP kind of acquisition process at Act Zero was to make sure we were looking at real versions of these, attacker behaviors and not things in a lab and not, threat intelligence and not all these other things that are historical, right? And you have to be able to test it against what's actually happening. And so, the security engineering department, that's all they do all day. It's just sort of hack the box and tell you where, the gaps are in the ability for either the models, the machine learning models, the policies, really the rules, to react to this, or whether they need something custom or specific or a workaround or whatever, right? Because without that testing, we really have no way, as things change every 24 hours, to stay relevant, right? And to tell people, frankly, we don't have this. You need to do this right now, right? And so this is where you get into the partnership, right? When we work with IT people on the other end of the phone, right, we need to tell them explicitly what to do to avoid an attack that, frankly, is not something we can quickly defend against, right? And unless they take that action, right, the many different programs that we put in place are not going to, they're not going to be successful, right? So that is definitely a strong part of it, is testing it, informing when we can't fix something, and being honest. The more transparent we are in this industry about what we can and can't protect, the better we're all going to be. Because if everybody falls into a false sense of security, then we're all unprepared.
Exactly. Well, as we do start to wrap up our episode here, though, we always ask our guests kind of the same final questions. And first off, that's, where do you see technology going in the next year? Where is this going to be? Where are we going to be in February, March, 2024, sorry.
Yeah, I think certainly the volume, the complexity, the success rate of attacks is going to continue, right? I think that we're going to start to see models that are not based on financial compensation, at least not directly from the attack. Most people have had this kind of safety net in their mind that if it really did go south, we could just use this cryptocurrency and pay these people and they would go away or give us our data back. And that's not necessarily the case, right? You probably don't have a way forward where if the attackers are going to take your data and they already have a great playbook for stealing your money with the stuff they took, they're probably just going to do that, right? Because they don't even have to ask.
Right.
And then when the future, especially as we get into kind of a more, a lot of posturing from different nation states and the way that, these wars in Europe and stuff have been going, right? This domain is ripe for them to fund themselves. And so the idea is that, there may be, funding extortion and there may not be, right? They may be just happy to destroy the business and move on, right? And so we want to make sure that we're all communicating as effectively as we can, that if we know the practices and we know what should be done, we should do it, because it's not like there's always going to be that sort of back door where we can just go around and say, oh, we'll just pay the attacker and not tell anybody and get on with our lives. We are going to have to start defending this to be successful, right? And that's where I think, it's going to go. It's probably going to get worse before it gets better. I don't see government policy intervening, at least not outside of a few critical industries like the defense based. But that just means it's even harder on, private sector and the partnerships they're in to do the right thing and to prepare.
And that's where the innovation comes in. That's where the technology and getting smarter with it every day. For listeners who have any questions about what we talked about today or want to find out more about Act Zero and their own vulnerabilities, how can they reach out?
Act0.ai, act0.com. I think one of the things we offer for free is, most people say we don't have any vulnerabilities, but they don't know what they look like under attack.
Yeah.
And so we developed an assessment to sort of show them what the attackers are doing to impersonate their admins and basically deploy ransomware. We call our ransomware readiness assessment we offer for free. We'll do it to test your existing technology and show you what we can do at the same time. So it's a valid exercise. We'll give you all the raw results so that you can see specifically where things fell down. And that's something you can get just by reaching out to us, act0.ai, act0.ai, or act0.com if you forget the AI.
Excellent. Well, really a lot of interesting stuff. Thank you so much, Adam, for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Shelby. Really appreciate it.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in and subscribing to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro. If you like this episode or have a question, please join the discussion on Twitter with the hashtag B2B Tech Talk. Until next time, I'm Shelby Skrhak.
You've been listening to B2B Tech Talk by Ingram Micro. This episode was sponsored by Ingram Micro Xvantage. B2B Tech Talk is a joint production between Sweetfish Media and Ingram Micro. To listen to this episode and many others, visit ingrammicro.com.